Hi, my name's Chelsea Grimmer. Chelsea R. Grimmer, depending on where you pulled this up from. I have a couple of videos that I've already recorded that I'll upload here, but I wanted to do a quick introduction to who I am. And of course, on my website, you can always peruse for more information. But the main reason I'm starting this is because I love talking to poets, I love talking about poetry, and I think it's so much more relevant to pop culture now than ever, especially in relation to racial equity and queer communities, which are usually marginalized and especially are not centered in higher education university, which is a classist-based versus class-based system. So some background on me and why I think I'm a good person to do this, or whether or not I'm a good person to do this is questionable, but I'm doing it. And then I think every few days I'll post a new video and we'll see how it goes. Might just be some of my closest friends watch for a while, but that's still a way of keeping in touch with my friends, so I'm totally down for that. So my background, I grew up in the Metro Detroit area of Michigan, and of course I was a nerd, like most of us that become English majors of some kind. I would play Game Boy Dragon games all the time. I liked Pokemon, and I think I read all the time as an escapist way of dealing with some of the different chemistry that I was born with, as well as with growing up in a Pentecostal, somewhat conservative town and family. In college, I went to Oakland University for my undergrad, and I worked for a nonprofit in Detroit Public Schools. And then as I came out and also chose to leave the church, specifically the church and Christianity at large, I eventually went to Portland, Oregon to get my MFA in poetry and then my MA in English. And really my goal the whole time was to teach poetry, write poetry, and talk to other people about how poetry can be a really useful space for pedagogy and helping people really expand how they think about their ethics, how they think about the body, how they think about themselves in relation to other people, how we own our emotional space and the way that it influences our intellectual spaces. But what I learned, as most of us poets do, is if I wanted to teach at a university level, which was my passion, I was incredibly inspired by amazing mentors and teachers in my college experience. You have to be a really widely published poet. And I am a published poet. You can find hyperlinks to poems I've had come out in journals. I've kind of tapered off of it a little bit while doing my doctorate for obvious time and emotion constraint reasons. But I don't think that the most published poets are the best poetry teachers always. Sometimes they are. Sometimes it's a magical combination. Sometimes they're not. And I had that personal experience for myself with some professors where I was like, oh my God, I love their poems. I can't wait to learn from them. And then I didn't learn much from them. And then I also kind of feel like the existing platforms for talking about poetry are podcasts, which I love. I especially recommend Rachel Zucker's Commonplace. And then Denez Smith and Franny Choi have a really fun podcast. It's kind of like a micro version. And they're actually particularly good at addressing issues of race and gender and sexuality, which is what I study. But there weren't really any video blogs. And then I was like, it'd be even better to have a live stream video where I interact with people, because sometimes I think poetry is seen as this weird creative genius blah 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 thing that isn't real, but I think it's actually one of the most grassroots forms of experiencing our embodied lives every day and interacting with each other. And I think that we need to start expanding what we call poetry, and we need to stop putting it into just the higher education classrooms, which is what's happening, I think, in mainstream poetry. So in that vein, I'm doing a video blog. My goal is I will take some of my own background and share it with you for free. I'm also going to eventually start offering consulting and teaching and proofreading and so on services like most of us writers and teachers do. But the main thing that's relevant to now is after my MFA and my MA, I came to Seattle and I've been doing my doctorate in English and Cultural Studies at the University of Washington. And so much to unpack there. It was my first experience at a research level 1 institution. It's my first experience in a very neoliberal city of mostly white liberals, which has a whole host of problems. I think everyone here cares more about being called racist than whether or not they are racist, for instance. And I had some sort of alarming experiences in the queer community, feeling like it replicated some of the sort of groupthink that my Pentecostal church was. And it's like, I'm really, really invested in, the more I do research, what types of poetry and pop culture create worlds that are new and exciting and different and reduce the harm we can do to one another on a daily basis, and especially to people who historically are repeatedly marginalized and violated. And I think one of those ways is by making things open access on the internet. So I get paid, not well, but still get paid to teach poetry and composition and multimodal writing at the University of Washington. I've been teaching college writing of some kind and done pedagogical trainings at least every year for almost 10 years now. I've been teaching since I was 16 because I used to coach ice skating, and then in undergrad I taught writing, and then in grad school I've been teaching writing. So I've been teaching a while, and I just wanted a space where if you can't afford to go to college, or it's just not something you can reasonably go to school for, because let's be real, poets don't make money by going to school. That's just not a thing. You can come here, and I'll be chatting a little bit about the books. I also want to do some readings, because I think that a lot of readings posted online are live events that then get recorded, which is very cool. But I think something that gets missed is the power of intimate settings, where we read poems out loud and feel their like emotional registers with our body. So that's kind of the idea. I'm very flexible on where this ends up going. I'll be fine if just one or two people end up connecting with me here, but the idea is to make it a little bit more open source for the college classroom, give you an idea of some of the things that I'm thinking about poetry or just my day that day, and connect with more people that are interested in using poetry to build coalitions that resist more oppressive forms of language use. This video blog will not be for you if you're here to try to find more supporters of Trump, if you are someone who believes that there should be a wall built, for instance, between the US and Mexico. I'm against national borders. I am well versed in the history of race. My dissertation is on the history of blackness and water regulation, and I'm queer. So I learned from one of my teaching mentors to not just say what you are for, but also let people know if it's not for you, it's not for you. And I won't be responding to or interacting much with any trolling or white supremacist agendas or homophobic agendas. But on the other hand, if you're someone who's like open-minded and you want to talk about these things, just because you're conservative or you have opinions that differ from mine doesn't mean that we can't talk about it. You know, I come from that background myself, and one of the crucial tenets of my pedagogy is the importance of having a really good dialogue. And I don't think that dialogue effort should fall on the emotional labor of marginalized people. But I find for myself, I'm uniquely situated to have those conversations because of where I come from. So that's something that I want to be able to take on more. And less so I can teach you how to think, as I can help meet you where you're at and talk about where your ideas come from and where my ideas come from. And I learn from my students as much as my students learn from me, I like to think. So that's kind of the idea of the blog. That's the general thrust behind it. I'm going to cut it off now just so I don't hit 10 minutes or longer, but the next podcast I'll talk a little more about why I'm doing this, and then I'll read a couple poems from Kaveh Akbar's book, Calling a Wolf a Wolf. Of course, everyone's reading it right now, but I'll talk then too about how I'm going to be selecting the poets and poems that I read. But I look forward to hopefully seeing some of you over the next couple of years and playing around with these different blog forms. And if you're watching this and you watch another one, major kudos, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So you're going to be along with me for the ride of figuring out how these things work. All right. Have a great day. Bye.